This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 83 of A Geek Leader podcast, and I am your host, John Rowden. Today on the show, I've got Carl Kinghorn with EFC Systems, and today we talk about how you grow, kind of shifting from being a developer to team lead to a higher leadership level. We talk about transparency. We talk about some of the relationship changes that have to be made whenever you do get promoted and become a manager of those that you used to be peers with. We talk about the importance of getting involved in groups, user groups. We talk about the importance of speaking at conferences. We talk a little bit about the alignment autonomy matrix, which is really cool. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really powerful, the things we discussed when it comes to transitioning to a leader. And if you like it, please head over to iTunes and leave me a rating and review. That would be awesome. But give it up for Carl Kinghorn.
Sure thing, John. I am Carl Kinghorn. I'm the vice president of my software development group at EFC Systems. And to kind of introduce your listeners to who EFC Systems is, we produce a suite of software that's really focused in the agricultural vertical. So it's comprised of a pair of ERP solutions targeting ag retailers and wholesalers. So usually I say to think of everyone from your independent local cooperative to ag retailers with hundreds of locations, grain mills, feed manufacturers, and warehouse distribution. Additionally, we have really amazing precision agronomy product, which allows our clients to do things like soil fertilizer analysis, track yield data, do asset management and telematics, optionally integrate back to that retail solution. So an agronomist could say, work with a grower to come up with a fertilizer solution and have it blended to their specific needs. And lastly, our newest offering is a tool that focuses on agronomic planning and sustainability. So this is very exciting because it allows us to help growers better understand the ROI of their past decisions, help them make better choices in the future, and track environmental performance metrics such as soil erosion, soil organic carbon, nitrate leaching, and others. And so you asked, how did I get here? So I didn't think coming out of school that I would end up in ag. I had no idea that was a thing, and I was kind of just looking for a company kind of to go into and start learning and growing. But I ran across EFC Systems. They were a small company. In fact, they were a very small company back then. I think I was employee number 45, something to that effect. I think we had 7 developers total at the time. And it was a pretty exciting place to be because, we had this product that was really kind of putting me in this position. I felt like I was a cog in the machine. And I know that's usually a negative, but I felt like that was a positive because I was really passionate about helping our clients help growers. I felt part of kind of feeding the world, if you will. I know that's probably real grand, but but that's kind of how I felt. So I was just a developer back then. I don't want to say just but I was a developer back then, and I was working for this product. And some of the things that I realized early on about us as a small company is that there were some challenges that we had. There's some challenges around breaking down barriers for collaboration. There were some challenges around processes that weren't very transparent. They were overly complicated. They really prevented us from scaling. And so even though I was very absorbed in wanting to write our software and do the best that we could, I had a lot of ideas around how we could do better, in our processes, how we could, fix certain systems that allowed us to better serve our clients. And I think that really kind of helped me, get the attention of and make my progress towards getting into that leadership because, we were going places. I saw back then that we were going places. And once we started adding more developers, we really had to make room to have other teams. And so I was able to grow into that team lead position. And don't get me wrong, that is a challenge. And we'll probably talk challenges all along as we go. It was a challenge because I was actually getting the opportunity to be a team lead for people that were my peers and growing in your own company versus finding another company in another position to advance can be kind of a challenge because you kind of got to pivot your relationship and understand how do I then go from kind of joking around with these people to really trying to set like the direction and what we're trying to accomplish. And then I just kind of continued from there where we continued to grow, and we did some restructuring where I ended up leading the whole development department, which is now 36 developers actually as of yesterday because we just hired someone else. And kind of that's a little bit about my journey. I'm sure we'll go into more as we continue.
So I wanted to hit on one thing you mentioned about
sure.
your relationship changes kind of as you get into leadership. How do you deal with moving from joking around and kind of being transparent, maybe overly transparent with some people, to having to step back and saying, now I'm the boss. I can't talk so much about things that I'm seeing with other people as I used to.
Sure. To be honest with you, and I don't know if it's part of the culture changes that we've had, but I think, well, I guess I can start with saying I do work with some really amazing people. One of the things about being a leader is if you can surround yourself with amazing people, you'll have a lot more success. Because it's really about the people. I work for my developers; they don't really work for me. And so having a group of people and a culture around respecting each other was really beneficial. It was really enabled me to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Yes, I can't share everything with you, but if we can get into alignment, then what we're trying to accomplish, then we can work together to accomplish the goals. And transparency is important, about as far as you can take it. I'm as transparent as I could possibly be. And I think that helps. I think it helps everybody understand, where we're going.
Mm-hmm. I agree. You mentioned that you work for your team. I think that's a really good quality to have for most leaders. A lot of people think of like the boss as being the guy that's going to tell them what to do, and you're going to work for that guy. But in reality, if you serve your team and grow your team and work hard to do the things that your team needs, to get things out of their way, to remove things that are blocking them, then they're willing to work back for you.
Absolutely. And actually, we talk about, kind of working for the team and all that. Have you ever, or I guess maybe your listeners have or haven't seen the kind of alignment autonomy quadrant system? I know there's a very good video that Spotify put out. But if you think about alignment and autonomy as two different labels on axes, and kind of form it into a quadrant system, you kind of develop this structure where you go from low alignment, low autonomy, which is no good because essentially you're kind of doing whatever you want. Your company has no direction, to high alignment with low autonomy, and that's that leader or that boss type person who is saying, hey, we need to do this, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. And that's not very inspiring. That doesn't give the people in your organization the feeling of being creative, and development is a very creative process. You also have that low alignment and high autonomy, which is, we don't understand where we need to go, and everybody kind of has the freedom to do whatever they want to do, so we're really not accomplishing anything. But my goal is to put our teams into a high alignment and high autonomy standpoint where we all understand exactly where we're trying to get to, and then the teams individually have the opportunity to come up with solutions that really get us there. And it's not so much a top-down structure where you're saying, do this, do it my way, but more of a, hey, we're trying to accomplish this, help me do that. Now, I won't say we're perfect. I think we're getting there. We're still telling that story, but that is ultimately the goal.
Yeah, I have seen that Matrix before. I think I saw it with like a Dilbert cartoon or something where it was talking about how
it does look like that. I think the guy's got tall hair on.
Yeah, it's like where basically the low alignment, high autonomy is kind of the chaotic period where it's just kind of crazy. And when you get in the high alignment, that's where you're achieving a lot quickly, but you're doing it in a collaborative fashion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah. So getting into that, how do you go about moving your teams? Let's say, as you're growing, I'm sure you go through that chaos period, and you talked about how your company has kind of grown pretty significantly over the past several years. How do you go about maintaining that high alignment during that growth? Because sometimes growth can be chaotic.
Oh, sure. I'll say it's a mix of the right culture and the right tools. I don't even love to talk about tools because really tools are kind of they're a means to an end. They don't define how your processes should be, but it helps when you've got the right things in place to help you communicate without barriers. Being able to say, hey, we all understand this because it's being done in the open. It's that kind of back to that transparency. And I will say it was a challenge. We had some missteps. I mean, we definitely had some structure changes that enabled better collaboration, more alignment, I'd say, in our organization. But it was definitely a challenge. I'd say changing the culture was probably the hardest thing and the most impactful. Going from where we had some barriers to communication that was cross teams, where say like the product management group wasn't so talkative with the developers. Things getting tossed over the wall. And the other way too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was developers tossing things over the wall to say QA or what have you. That tossing over the wall is not a good place to be, because you're not talking about it. You're not understanding what the goals are, and taking down those walls was probably the most impactful.
Yeah. So how do you go about doing that when some of those teams that have those walls up aren't necessarily reporting to you? You mentioned product, kind of that communication. How do you go about convincing your people to make that first step, or that gesture of kindness or openness over to them when maybe in the past that hasn't been there?
Sure. Sometimes you do have to be kind of the bigger person in the room, I guess, and take a step back and say, like, hey, let's talk about this. Let me flex a little bit to the way that we need to do things based on how you're thinking. But then maybe let's meet in the middle somewhere. Let's say, how do we both understand each other's needs and kind of find that middle ground? I guess that's kind of the best way I could put it, is just to find that middle ground. And you're right. When they don't report to you, you really have to talk kind of at the higher level and say, hey, your department is doing these kind of things. Is there a way for us to find that middle ground and say, how can we help you, and then how can you help us?
Yeah, I think that's the key right there, is finding a way that you can help them first, even if it's harder on you, and then have them help you in return.
Yep.
Because people are willing to give that generosity and that kindness whenever they see it sometimes, but it may be hard in the past when they haven't experienced that in return.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about changing the culture and what that process was like, or how that made your team feel before and after, and kind of during the shakeup or the movement of that change.
Sure. So, when we talk about changing the culture, you can get into a position where, especially with culture changes, or especially seeing the culture of your organization where, this is rough, it's an insurmountable type thing. How do you change people's attitude? And so I have this kind of change where you work kind of mindset, and I chose to change where I work, in this case, stay where I was and make the changes that I wanted to see. And as far as focusing on that, we had sayings. When we talk about alignment, we actually have an arm gesture that goes along with that. That is, from the viewer's perspective, the quadrant that we want to be in. So you kind of do this 90-degree angle with your arms, and it's talking about this alignment quadrant that we want to be in, and things where we talk about collaboration from the very beginning. Collaboration is a word that I say probably 30 times during the interview process, because I want people to understand what they're getting into. I want people to understand where, you're coming into an organization where that's what we want. We have to be able to collaborate, to understand, from our client's perspective, what is their frustration, what is their necessity, and then how do we get into development to make something that actually accomplishes that goal, actually gives them some sort of value. Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're really just trying to provide value for our clients. And so how did the people take it? I don't think there was a lot of pushback. I think it was a lot of, trying to adapt to this new world. I don't think that people were just out going, no, I don't want to collaborate. And I'd say after it, the result of that is that we have a much happier group. And that's important. I mean, you want to be able to come into work and do something that is kind of, inspiring to work on. You want to work on something and work with people that give you some sort of feeling of success, feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, you talked at the beginning about kind of how you saw working in agriculture as feeding, the world, and that's kind of a way to add purpose, which motivates people and inspires people and encourages them to do a job that maybe they're not 100% happy with the work that they're doing, but they're happy with the result and the what they're achieving, and it kind of makes coming to work that much more satisfying.
Absolutely.
So do you guys talk about that a lot, or do you talk about that at all, about the kind of the benefits that you guys have in the long run?
So I'd say it's minimal. I probably have this grandiose idea of how we're impacting everything, and you can look at it from a bunch of different perspectives. I mean, we kind of work on the agribusiness side, so some people might think, oh, well, we're writing another report that gives some manager a better insight into their cost. okay, that's one thing, or you can think of it as, well, really, if we help our clients understand how these things work, if I can point out where like you're wasting a lot of money doing this process because here's a high cost item or here's a high cost manufacturing that you're doing, they can then reduce that. They can improve their processes, which hopefully, in theory, like brings all these things down the line, so that like the grower at the end result going, hey, I've saved money because the retailer saved money, because the wholesaler saved money, because I better understood, the way my field data is, and I can, understand that, well, this part of my field is a super high cost because we pour 90% of our fertilizer cost into it, and then maybe I just won't even plant there. And so now I've not only increased my ROI because I'm getting a better value out of my field. Maybe I don't have as much yield, but changing the whole industry's mindset away from yield and towards ROI not only makes it better for the farmer, but also for sustainability, because we're not putting 90% of the resources into an area that is a low yield or high cost, low yield area.
Yeah, I've always tried to take that same purpose approach where you kind of see the bigger possibility. I know I worked at an ISP, and I would talk about how our communication is helping people talk to their loved ones across the continent when they can't do that otherwise through Wi-Fi.
No, that's amazing.
Whereas other people are like, no, it lets people stream Netflix,
Right.
But either way. So what are some of the you talked about some of the high-tech things that your company's doing, and if I didn't grow up near Clemson University, who's an agricultural, they talk all the time about tech and agricultural. When I was at high school, they would come and visit and talk about all the high-tech things going on in agricultural. If I didn't grow there, I wouldn't have known that dirt could be so high-tech. But what are some of the things that you guys are doing to some of the projects that are on the forefront that are interesting and exciting?
So I have to say our probably the forefront is in our precision agronomy and our agronomic planning and sustainability. And really that's back to that environmental performance metrics that we were tracking, able to take some data once we gather some information about the fields and really help our customers, help their growers better understand that process and better understand where they can make the right decisions for really to run their business. I mean, we say run the farm, but I mean, it is a business at the end of the day. I don't know if there's anything magical about what we're doing. It's definitely, a vertical that we're in and we're focused on. So we like to say that we're doing it the best. I'd say we are, but I don't know if you're looking for like a specific technology or anything like that.
No, that's good. When it comes to growing your development team and your department, what do you look for in a candidate that you're looking to hire?
Communication, probably more than anything. Honestly, I've really adapted my interview process from where I started, not really understanding, being on that side of the table. And it takes a lot of practice. Interviewing is a hard skill. I'd say both in understanding, what the client or what the candidate, what they're capable of, what they're able to kind of do with you, and then make a decision that yes, that's the person I want on my team. And it's something you definitely have to practice. I used to be very technical about it. I'd ask, hard, like technical questions. It was almost like academia. But then I realized that there's actually low value in that. Higher value for me is kind of getting to a baseline understanding of, yes, this person has technical skill. We talk, have a conversation about, what kind of things, what is good looking code to you? What is, how's your test process? What are some important things that you're thinking about in terms of, patterns and practices while you're developing? But really, like, I want to do an exercise that is just, no code on a whiteboard, but really kind of, boxes and diagrams to understand how we work through a problem together. We've actually even adapted it to, it's now a take-home exercise where we say, all right, look at this problem set. Come in and we're going to talk about it because, again, we just really want to talk and figure out how you work through a problem. So, it's definitely more communication, problem solving than that hard, like, can you write an if-then statement in whatever language we're talking about today?
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. when you get too technical, I used to get really technical as well. I'd ask really hard SQL questions for a DBA or something like that, some obscure thing to see what they would know, and kind of get deeper and deeper. And it would lose the focus that this person may know SQL, but can they talk? Can they share their knowledge? Are there I hired one person I remember one time that was super good at the interview as far as knowing all the buzzwords and knowing all the code that we had them write, the sample code. But then when they got there, they wouldn't share with the things that they knew with the rest of the team. And they were kind of one of those things like, no, I'm not going to give you my code. I'm not going to, they weren't a team player at all. But I never asked a single question about collaboration or how you work with teams or how would you handle this, how would you coach someone or mentor someone. And it was, all on me for not asking those questions, but I didn't really think to do that. So I think that's a really good approach to do the communication. And I like the idea of whiteboarding out something too with them. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So once you hire someone and bring them on, one of the things that I've noticed a lot of managers and leaders struggle with is the onboarding process. What are some ways that you would get someone up to speed quickly with your team and onboard them successfully?
So we actually struggled with this as well, especially I guess when we were kind of in that growth period when we didn't have a more mature process. And back to what I was saying about surrounding yourself with amazing people, I actually had someone who was willing to champion that, who said, hey, I really actually enjoy kind of that teaching process. I want to help you help you develop a program to onboard our next people. I said, that's great. That's amazing, because it's been kind of ad hoc up until now. And so we worked together to come up with some documents in terms of, well, these are the checklist of items that I need to be sure that we supply for them. Do they have the right hardware? Do they have the right things installed? Can they get access to our code? And then it's a matter of, well, let's start with understanding how you even navigate the solutions. How do you navigate the whole process and procedure of what we do day to day? That's, to me, far more important. And I do set some very specific expectations with our new employees in terms of your value to me when you first start is in learning our process, learning our code base, et cetera. Don't feel like you're pressured on time. This work item that you might get at some point is estimated at X. That's not my expectation for you. I think it's going to take a developer coming into our organization probably about 5 months to really get ramped up to about 100% kind of with the team. Can take a project, do it on their own, no problem. 100% productive, if you want to call it that. But it's a long process. I mean, when you're working in larger systems, I think just even understanding the big scope of it, understanding the business. I mean, we're in ag. You talked about if you hadn't grown up around ag, would you even know? When I came out of school and I joined this organization, I didn't know anything about ag. It takes a while to get ramped up to speed. There's a lot of domain knowledge, and there's a lot of weird things that the ag industry does that is possibly counterintuitive to someone who's worked in another business. I mean, just the cooperative mentality where you're customers are kind of your owners at the same time, and all the process around that, is foreign to a lot of people. So it's an interesting process, but I think it's all about supplying them with the tools for the new candidate or the new hire to be successful.
Yeah, I think the domain knowledge piece that you mentioned is really important. I've had a couple of new hires that started out and they wanted to, they would say, oh, what do I need to finish within the first, 30 days and 60 days and 90 days? And I'm like, I'm not going to put a deadline on when you finish, learning and getting up to speed, because, I don't want to say, oh, you didn't learn this one concept by this certain time, or I want it to be a more organic, natural growth. But I do think you're absolutely right. If you came from one agricultural company to another one, you're going to be able to pick up some of those inherent traits that are specific to that domain of knowledge that other people wouldn't have if they came from, let's say, banking or something like that.
Right.
And I think sometimes people don't realize the value in staying in one lane or what it will take to switch over. So after you onboard and when you're looking for people and helping them understand the culture and the collaboration, how important is it for those people maybe to be involved in the community in different groups? I know you yourself are part of the Nashville .NET is it user group? It is. Can you talk a little bit about that and about how important that is?
So, I don't think that everyone has to be involved in the community. That is just one of those things that's not for everyone. First of all, it's a time commitment outside of work. I mean, this is definitely a profession, right? Development can be a passion for a lot of people to the point where they're spending time on the weekends. They're doing open source software. They're going out to these user groups. They're going to conferences. Those are all really wonderful things, but they're not required. Do I encourage it, especially as the president of the Nashville .NET User Group? Absolutely. I think it's wonderful. I really thoroughly enjoy it myself. But I make it very clear that there's no pressure, like especially coming from me as kind of the VP, which is, sometimes people's boss's boss kind of thing. I don't want them to think, oh, I got to go to this because Carl is going to this. So we're pretty clear about that. But in terms of, making yourself better, there's a lot of value in participating because you're going to get to meet people who are doing something differently than how you think it's to be done. I know that just for myself, just going to conferences over the year, I've gotten exposed to many different perspectives of how this person uses this technology in this way, or put myself in a different mindset around a style of code, or even just a technology that I was curious about that I couldn't really find that good video on. I couldn't really find that good book on, but I was able to find someone who had its talk and able to engage with them, right there in person and say, hey, I've struggled with this. Can you help me just like make something click for me? And I think that's what's wonderful. And if you have a group, and I know just like I take collaboration and this kind of hopefully positivity that I take from my organization and I bring it to this other user group, I want people to come and network. I want people to come and have that conversation beyond just coming to listen to the speaker of the month or the person who's presenting a particular topic, because that's where you really kind of get to ask your own questions and discover that one little thing that makes it click for you. And I think that's what's critical. Yeah,
I found that, when I was, especially when I was actively developing, before I, got into management and kind of had to step back from that, going to user groups was very helpful for me just to find other people that were struggling with the same problems that I was, or to find solutions that were kind of outside of the realm of the people that I worked with, and just to, build that relationships with those around me. I have to say now that I've been in leadership for a while, and since I've had kids, I haven't been going nearly as much. I try to still hit the conferences every now and then. While you're at these events, what kind of value, let's say it's to someone who's never been to a user group, what can they expect going to their first meeting, and what's the requirements for going, or what's it like for that first time?
Sure. So I'd say, well, at least most of the ones around Nashville, no requirements. I mean, as far as prerequisites and understanding, go to a user group that makes you uncomfortable. I don't know this particular technology. I want to go see something about this technology. Go to a user group that is talking about something that you're not familiar with. We actually have a very healthy, very positive development community here in Nashville. There's pretty much any technology or language or anything you're interested in, there's an available user group for it. But I'd say go with the expectation that someone may or may not approach me. I've been to different places where, just like anything else, it can get a little cliquey. It depending on the person who's running the group, they may or may not just try to go out and like forcibly engage with everybody who's there. Not forcibly, that's a bad word, but I'm saying put themselves in a position where they're saying, hey, I've never seen your face before. I'd like to, meet you and kind of welcome you to the group. But I'd say most of them are that kind of welcoming group. Most of them are the groups where they'll say, hey, come on in. We just want to learn some things. Most of them have, free food, which is great. So expect a good set of, pizza or sandwiches or something to that effect. And then I'd say most of them are going to be kind of a format where there's a speaker who's going to talk for about an hour, give you some content, and then possibly have some networking at the end of it. And that's where I think there's a lot of value is in part of that networking and connecting with people.
Yeah, I always found that I learned more in between the sessions than I did during the sessions. I mean, not taking anything away from any speaker, and me being a speaker at many events in the past, I totally get that too. But you get to hear something that someone said and then talk about it, and get to know other people. And it's also a great way to find other opportunities if you are in the job market as well, because there's always someone out there that's looking for somebody.
Absolutely. And you talk about being a speaker. This I've been 10 years in industry, which I know is kind of a not 20 or 30 like some people for sure, but I actually just gave my first technical talk this year because I was very nervous to do it, and now that I've done it, I'd recommend it to everyone. I think if you've got something you want to talk about, find some lightning talks, find a user group where you can go share an idea. It's really not bad to get up and share your content, especially in terms of like lightning talks where it's about 10 minutes. Those are wonderful because then you can just kind of try it out. Just try making yourself that person who can share some information with others, and then you start establishing yourself a little bit as a leader in that particular topic, or at least a source of knowledge in that particular topic. And sometimes you can then start having conversations with people that you may not have before, and they'll help you understand it as much as you're helping them understand it.
I think that is absolutely correct. That's 100%. I found whenever I started speaking at conferences, which the reason why I started doing it is because the company that I worked for at the time didn't have much of a budget to send me to a conference. So if I wanted to go, I kind of had to be a speaker and go for free. So I started doing that, and the first couple of talks I was really nervous at first, but then as soon as I did it, it was like this rush of adrenaline or something that made me feel really good about it. And I was like proud of myself or something. But I found that in order for me to give a talk about something, I had to really know it. I had to study it. I had to learn it. Otherwise, I wasn't comfortable speaking about it. And it's just kind of one of those ways to really learn something is to give a talk on it.
There's probably a famous quote that says something to that effect. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, if you want to learn something, teach it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And another thing when it comes to speaking at groups, there are many different companies where I've seen like job descriptions and org charts, and if you want to get to a certain level, even if you don't want to be in management, let's say you want to be like a principal engineer or something like that, I've seen requirements where they say, to be a senior engineer, you have to do all these things, but then to be a principal engineer, you have to do those things, but also be known in the community or be known outside of this organization. And probably the best way of doing that is to give talks and be known, be one of those people that people follow on Twitter or hit up or ask you questions or are interested to hear what you have to say about things, and will bring topics and discussion questions to you to get your insight and your input.
Sure. I've actually not run across that myself, but and I again, just like I was talking about before, I don't see it as a requirement to go to these kind of things, especially to kind of have that. Well, you have to be known in the community. I would say that there's some. I mean, I know Microsoft has developer and evangelists and such that probably have to be known in the community in some way, shape, or form. But that's interesting. I have not run across that before.
Basically, they had junior, mid-level, senior, staff, and then principal. And to get to principal, you had to have everything that staff and senior had, but also it said be known in the community, which is
interesting.
Which I thought that was pretty interesting. And I assume they probably would be like the evangelist, where they would want the person to speak and mention their company,
sure,
from a marketing perspective. So when it comes to being in management and making that shift from team lead or developer to team lead, what are some of the things that you think are valuable or extremely important for someone that's ready to make that leap, that they haven't done that yet? They haven't managed people, they haven't led people yet, but they really want to, and they're getting ready to make that leap. Maybe they're getting a promotion or they're looking for a new job. What are some of the things that they need to be learning, or some skills that they need to have to be successful when they make that change?
Sure. First of all, one of my biggest pieces of recommendation to people looking to make any advancement is understand that especially management, is not always the path to success. I think, a lot of times companies will put, their most amazing developer or their most, talented X into a position of leadership, and then they may not succeed at it. Understand that this is something that, just like anything else, takes practice, takes understanding some of the important aspects of what it takes to be a leader. And then I would definitely recommend going out and finding some sort of resource, whether you're a person who likes to read, person who likes to watch videos or listen to podcasts, kind of like this one, and understand kind of the best components. And I think it's important to focus on communication. One of the things that I think is important in a leader is being able to flex your communication style to the person that you're speaking to. So understand, your people who you work for, essentially, and then be able to effectively tell them, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. In terms of other skills that I think are required to be a leader, I mean, organization is something that I think everyone is going to say. Being able to understand, for yourself, because you're really the person who's going to be setting direction for a number of other people. You have to be well organized. You have to be able to kind of triage things and understand a priority and say, yeah, okay, so this is the 200 emails that I got today. I can't possibly take action on every single one of them. That just isn't hours in the day. Triaging that, understanding what is actually important, what actually needs to get accomplished, and then understand what a delegation is and how to do that. You're going to feel, I know I felt when I first came into a leadership role and I started not developing as much as I used to back when I was a team lead, because we were probably still, 50-50-ish. I felt like I wasn't making anything. I was like, how am I providing value? I really struggled with that in terms of, not having that feeling of at the end of the day, like I got a work item done or I got a work order done. That was rough. And then especially, moving up a step beyond that where I have zero time to do any kind of development, I don't feel as though I produce things, but yet I understand that part of my role or my whole role is really just making sure that the people that I have the opportunity to work with are able to do their jobs the most effectively that they can, that we're making the right decisions that are for the company and for our employees, and then moving forward to be successful.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I know that was one of the things. Well, several of those things you mentioned are some of the things that I struggled with when I became a manager, and communicating the way that people respond to you. I think that is one of the bigger things because I always thought that I didn't understand perspective. I didn't understand that different people have different perspectives, and I couldn't empathize with that very well. So I'd always talk to people the way that I wanted to be talked to. And what I found out is a lot of people don't respond the way that I would respond to that. They had to have their own style of communication, their own ways that they learn from. And that was a challenge for me to overcome. And then the idea of feeling like you're not providing value because you're not coding, you're not checking something off of a checkbox. That was difficult for me too. And one of the ways that I felt like I got past that was understanding that I'm no longer building products or writing code or building an application, but I'm building people. I'm building skill sets within people. I'm helping to grow their ability to write code. And that was kind of the shift that I had to go through in my mind to feel like I was adding value.
I think you hit the nail on the head, for sure. And to kind of a point you're making there, one of my career paths when I was younger, I actually wanted to be a teacher. And I think getting into a leadership role and having the opportunity to be a part of all these people's lives that I get to work with every day, I've had the opportunity to be a teacher, even not as a teacher, because you really do, like you were talking about, you're making them, you're developing people. You're really kind of advancing their skills and focusing on what makes this, what allows me to get out of the way to make them successful, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, and that's you're right. As a good leader, you have to be a teacher. You have to teach many different things, but teach about the business, teach about. You probably don't have to teach code if you hire a really good person. But you have to teach about cooperation, integrating things with different folks, sharing, general communication that we talked about already. Those are all things that, as a good leader, you have to teach to your team and remind folks of those things like a teacher would do.
Sure.
So what are some final tips that you may have for people that are making that transition and becoming a leader? You talked about some of the things that they need to learn. Is there any things that they could, just one final tip that they could take that would be actionable that they could start on today?
The communication is probably my biggest actionable item. Understanding a little bit more about, just that communication style that I was talking about and flexing to your people. But I guess as a final tip, I'm a big believer in, bringing the people that you work with up. It's easy to feel like, hey, my team is doing all this, I'm successful, and saying I a lot, but I try to shift the focus away from the I and into the we. We accomplished this. I didn't accomplish this. It's really one of those things that you can get into, really kind of like recognizing that ability in the others that make you successful. I think would be important, and kind of maybe a final tip, and just being out there and being a successful leader.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That's excellent advice to always, celebrate as a team and not as yourself, and to give credit for those below you and beneath you in the org chart. I don't want to say below you, but maybe beneath you in the org chart. I think that is definitely a big win because it celebrates those that you're leading, and in turn, they're going to be more excited and more responsive to that. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. How can people get in touch with you if they have any questions or want to communicate with you? What's the best way?
So probably the easiest way is I'm slightly active on Twitter, at Carl Kinghorn, just all one word would be a good way to reach me. And then, reach out to me there. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And just like this, if anyone wants to reach out, if they want to, have a talk, or if they want to see me at the Nashville User Group or Nashville.NET User Group, if you're in the Nashville area, please come by and say hi.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.